Okay, class. Well, welcome to a new week in our class on STEM Makerspaces. So just as a reminder, again, next week is going to be a spring break week, but you will have that active interactive whiteboard project due during that week. So it's due March 11th. And remember, if you haven't watched last week's video on this project, it talks about the different alternatives to the project that you can do if you don't have a classroom where you're teaching with an interactive whiteboard. So be sure to check that out. It's a February 20th video for this class. And it also tells the basics of the assignment if you're not sure what to do for that assignment. So be sure to look at that video. If it's not in the class, and if you haven't watched it, then you can find it on YouTube as well. Alright, so this week's on STEM Makerspaces, you're going to be watching some videos about educational makerspaces, and this will get you a feel for what a makerspace is. It's an environment, an open learning environment where students can come in and try different things out and do what we call constructive learning from the meaningful learning framework. And so other elements of the meaningful learning framework are present as well, but constructive learning, I think, is especially present in these types of makerspaces. And so you'll watch some videos about makerspaces in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and get a feel for those. You'll also do some readings on educational makerspaces and how they can be set up and what type of environment would make them successful. So hopefully through the readings and the videos you get an idea of what a makerspace is about, and then there's a discussion as you watch a video of Audrey and his monster trap. What evidence do you see of constructive learning going on in that type of video as you watch it, and then we'll have a discussion on that. Be sure to respond to 2 other students' posts in that discussion. So those are the activities for this week. Now as we look ahead a little bit, so next week will be spring break, but you'll have that active interactive whiteboard project you can submit. And then the week after that, there's a constructive makerspace assignment, and we're building toward this assignment as we learn about makerspaces. But the idea with this assignment is that you are going to be able to create an information sheet about a makerspace item that you have access to. And this could be almost anything. It could be anything that requires your students to do constructive learning, to have that open learning environment. So as you read, think about what objects you have access to in your experience or in your area or at your school that might give you a chance to be an object as part of an information sheet. And so that's one part, is to make an information sheet, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And then number 2 is organize a makerspace experience for students. And that experience would make use of the information sheet and hopefully other information sheets, and would allow students to come in and do that open learning, and then you reflect upon the experience of having a makerspace experience or becoming involved in one. Now the sky's the limit on this. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be something you set up for hundreds of students. It could just be a small one within a classroom, but it needs to be an experience of some time, probably 30 to 45 minutes at the least, that students are able to do some open learning with some constructive learning materials. People have used very basic things such as toilet paper tubes to create a marble run, or maybe it's more sophisticated tools like some of the ones that I have, like the Dash robot, or other tools that are technology toys and so forth. So that's the assignment for Constructive Makerspace assignment. The information sheet is due on that 18th, I believe. But the experience is not due until the end of the semester, so excuse me, you have some time to think about that. So that's the constructive makerspace assignment, and just wanted to finish with a few words about constructive learning today and talk about this concept. So constructive learning, and think back on what you've read about this when you talked about the meaningful learning framework. It connects to our natural ways of learning. When what we see is not what we expect, we need to make sense of our experiences. And this is called cognitive dissonance, and in the book they called it puzzlement, this idea that students see something that they didn't expect. And then they have to figure out why that is the case. I didn't expect that to happen, so how can I make sense of it? So learning starts when we cannot explain what's going on. And you see this in Makerspaces a lot because students have little objects that they're playing with maybe, or little items that they're dealing with. And they have to figure out why it's not working the way that it is, or what it's doing, or those kinds of things. And so they can't explain what's going on very well until they try to figure it out and try to work through it. So within constructive learning, these are some of the definitions of that type of learning. Learners must reflect on a puzzling experience, and that's the reflection part of it. They must think about it a little bit, figure out what's going on, and they must make sense of what they observe, and that's articulation part. That means they actually have to explain what they observe, like what's going on here is, here's what I think is going on, and then explain it. And then learners must build a mental model that explains what is observed. And so as they try to explain things and try to figure things out, they start to build a mental model or an idea in their head about how this whole system works together. And then they have constructive learning happening. So this is one way to think about it. What recent experiences with your learners introduced them to something they could not explain and then required them to think of and share a viable explanation? Because that is constructive learning in a nutshell. So as you move forward and learn about Makerspaces, think about how it supports constructive learning. And then also you'll have to reflect upon your experience of having a Makerspace or being involved in a Makerspace and come up with an explanation or come up with some topics or comments on how you think constructive learning has been shown in that experience with the students. All right, well, have a great week.